A Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie Tank, Part 82, removing the spectacle plate, soldering some loose brass beading, and a look at a small Proxxon jigsaw. This episode starts off showing me refitting the wooden frame to the superstructure, because I need to work on it, and this superstructure really is weak, and it will be even weaker once I've removed the spectacle plate. What's the plan? Well, I'm going to remove the spectacle plate because I need to make a new one, which will be a different shape to accommodate the round top boiler. I did think about making a dummy square top firebox. Form follows function, so I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm perfectly happy with the fact that this is after all a simplex locomotive with a round top firebox. The first part of the job involves a little bit of ultraviolence. I'm removing the tops of the rivets down each side of the spectacle plate. And as you can see, I'm using a chisel, which makes short work of them, first on one side and then on the other side. And I am aware that the chisel is marking the brass of the spectacle plate, but it really doesn't matter as I'm not going to reuse this. Its only function once it's been removed is to make a pattern to make a new spectacle plate with the extension for the round top boiler. The top part of the spectacle plate at this side was soldered for some reason, and here I'm using a small blowtorch to just heat it up enough to melt the solder so that the chisel can lever it away from the brass angle. I tried not to get the part too hot because I do not want to unsolder the half-round beading round the edge. But unfortunately accidents do happen and the half-round beading became loose at the top. You may wonder what I'm doing here. I'm using a Barco pipe wrench. In a very unorthodox way, I'm using it as a clamp, and the weight of the handle just puts enough pressure on to hold the half-round beading back in place. As the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. What I propose to do is heat the top part just enough to melt some solder into it. I've cleaned the gap between the half-round beading and the metal edge of the cab using a piece of 400 grit wet-to-dry sandpaper so the metal surfaces are clean. Once the metal got hot enough, I applied a blob of solder to the very top. In this part of the clip, I'm pressing the half-round beading against the edge of the cab, and you can clearly see that the molten blob of solder is now holding the top of the beading in place. And here's the clever bit. I've moved the improvised clamp to the top, so it's acting as a heat sink on the blob of solder. And that soon took care of the simple repair job. The half-round beading is firmly attached to the edge of the cab again. Now I'm using a wire brush in my Proxxon motor tool at a low speed just to remove the excess solder. I decided not to attempt tapping the rivets back through the holes. Instead, I used the hammer and chisel method to level them with the piece of angle. First at one side and then the other. Doing it this way puts a minimum of stress on the parts. The next part of this job is very important. I initially cut this cardboard template roughly to the shape of the boiler. Now, before I use it as a template to cut the metal, it needs to be exactly the same shape as the boiler. To shape the cardboard, I used the round end of my 4-inch belt sander, and by using a simple process of trial and error, the cardboard template is now a perfect fit on top of the boiler. In fact, it's a little bit larger than it needs to be because I do need some clearance. This morning I've ordered some brass from Blackgates Engineering, so that should arrive later on this week. Last week I bought this. It's a Proxxon Jig Saw. I was going to buy a scroll saw, which is like a powered fret saw, but the last time I had one of those I just couldn't keep up with its demand for blades. I was breaking them all the time, too heavy-handed. And that's why I bought this small jigsaw. Its 12-volt operation is great because I have a power supply that will allow me to plug plenty of these into it. I tried the power supply for electroplating, but it was far too heavy duty. But the good news is it's perfect for this job, although this isn't it. This is just a single outlet power supply. Shortly after I filmed this clip, I changed the power supply for the other one, which has 4 outlets. Now it's time to see how the jigsaw performs. 2 blades came with it and I bought some extra ones. The problem is holding the piece of metal, and of course cutting it on a plastic table is not the smartest thing I've ever done. I decided to cut it on the workbench, towards the workbench, but it was quite difficult just to hold the piece of brass in place. And as you can see, it was quite happy cutting through the thick plywood as well as the 2mm brass. I would say that this small Proxxon Jigsaw is okay, and at £46 it just wasn't expensive. The secret is allowing it time to cut. I found this method to be quite effective. I held the piece of brass against a piece of scrap mahogany, and in no time at all, as you can see here, the cut was completed. Well, almost. At least you can see how well it works. Then I tried it on a really thin piece of brass, like the stuff I used to clad the boiler. I really should have bought one of these to cut the holes in the cladding for the steam dome and the safety valve bushes. It does mark the brass slightly, but not very much at all. And it's very easy to control, it doesn't run all over the place. This small jigsaw is a very useful addition to my collection of Proxxon tools in the workshop. I find them to be very good quality. I think I'll make a wooden jig to hold the spectacle plate metal when I cut the holes out of that, but I will have to wait until the brass arrives. That's it for now. Stay well, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.